Welcome into Go Big 12, Go Home. And I'll tell you what, Drew Russell, this is the biggest weekend in Big 12 history as far as I'm concerned. 126 different outcomes this weekend can determine who we see in Arlington next weekend. I mean, it doesn't get any more Big 12 than that.
126 is an absurd
126. That's
number.
crazy.
Like, that is a legitimately insane number, but a rightful number considering how ridiculous this season has been.
Well, I mean, you think about it like this. In the ACC, there's 0 scenarios. In the Big Ten, there's one scenario or one outcome. In the Pac-12, there's probably, I don't know, 2 outcomes, 3 outcomes maybe.
Yeah,
Am I missing any other conference? The SEC has 0
SEC.
outcomes.
Yep.
The Big 12 has 126.
It's incredible. But again, I mean, just the balance of the league this year and how nobody seems to want to grab the bull by the horns outside of, I guess, Texas, and even they could still find a way to falter. I mean, is crazy. I mean, the amount of outcomes, Brandon, is fantastic. It's great for the league, and it creates a lot of interest going into this Thanksgiving weekend.
No kidding. And this is typically usually supposed to be like the peak of college football. You get the Michigan Ohio State game. You get all these great rivalries, and then just to throw on top of that, just the madness going on in Middle America in the Big 12 conference. You couldn't chalk it up any bit better than that.
No, you can't. And I mean, this season we were talking about last week, just the absurdity of the league. Like, just a week ago, we were reading out scenarios where if every Big 12 home team last week and then every away team this week won out, we were going to have an Iowa State Texas Tech Big 12 championship game, which would have been just sheer chaos. So that tells you where this league has been this year. And we've still got some really intriguing teams that kind of have to iron some things out this coming week, because you look at both Oklahoma teams. You have Texas, you have Kansas State. There's, as you mentioned, so many different possibilities to this. And for Brent Yormark and the Big 12 as a whole, they've got to be very pleased just how this season has played out. Because from just a genuine, like, let's keep people on the edge of their seat in an entertainment business, Big 12 has really delivered on its product, I feel, for the majority of the year.
You're absolutely right. And let's kind of take a look at what some of these scenarios are, because there's still, it's crazy how half the league is still involved in it. Obviously, you have, some favorites and whatnot, but the fact that half the league is still alive is incredible content here. So we'll kind of get into it here. Let me cut this down here a little bit. That's not what I wanted to do. This is fine. But so it all starts on Friday night, because that's when Texas and Texas Tech play. So if Texas wins, they clinch a berth on Friday. And then
Mhm.
the following scenarios apply around the Big 12. Then if Oklahoma State beats BYU, then it's Oklahoma State. So those two teams are the teams that control their destiny, in Texas and Oklahoma State. If Oklahoma defeats TCU on Friday, and that's followed by a Texas win and an Oklahoma State loss, then the Sooners are back in the Big 12 championship as a 2 seed. So we get a Red River showdown once again, which I feel like as Big 12 purists, it's kind of worst case scenario. And then if Kansas State defeats Iowa State on Saturday, following a Texas win and a TCU win, then that's the path for Kansas. That's the easiest path, I would say, for Kansas State to get back in and involved in Texas. And so we'll kind of go through that bit before it gets real off the walls here if Texas loses on Friday. But it seems like Oklahoma State's got the inside edge, but we also said that just a couple weeks ago when they played UCF.
Yeah, that's the thing is, I think we've had about what feels like 100 different narratives this last month of like a team that you and I have felt strongly about, and then they go lay an egg the next week, or a team that we potentially wrote off all of a sudden turns it around and shows some life for a week or two. And I don't expect this weekend to be any different. I mean, for Texas as a whole, they've got to be feeling pretty good about themselves to survive on the road back-to-back weeks against TCU, then go to a pretty raucous environment in Ames last Saturday and beat Iowa State. On paper, they're at home. They should be able to take care of business against Texas Tech. But Texas Tech all of a sudden is showing some life on their side as well. So who knows? Like, honestly, at this point, who on earth knows? I know that for I'm sure Big 12, just the board, and for all the other schools, sure they're praying they don't get a Texas Oklahoma, matchup in the Big 12 championship. If you're Texas, that's who I'd want is Oklahoma to try to avenge that loss to just to make a stronger case in the college football playoff. But it's really interesting to see they were still figuring out these rules, Brandon. Like they were still trying to like make sure everything was clarified in the last couple days. So I think we finally have it. This looks like a pretty good written word out of the conference themselves, but I was concerned, Brandon. You and I were
Yeah.
we were ready to step in and try to save the day. We were ready to go to Dallas and protest if needed.
And I'm still not 100% sure on what the outcome of that clarification was. Because I don't think they changed anything, but it
They put
feels
words on
like,
a paper, Brandon, so it
yeah,
looked official to me. They got
yeah,
me. I'm a sucker. I saw words. And I said that looks good to me, Big 12.
yeah. I feel like if they had changed anything objectively, we would have heard about it from Cyclone Larry. He's pretty against it. But so that's kind of the cleanest path is if
Mhm,
Texas takes care of business on Friday, and then it's between those three teams who really have that kind of outside shot. Now, if Texas were to lose on Friday to Texas Tech, which we're all rooting for a myriad of reasons, horns down,
mm,
especially after the last couple of weeks where I kind of
mm,
got up for him. Like, let's see, this is the game. Kansas State's got him.
mhm,
Defending Big 12 champs going to go take him down, and then you have that night game in Fort Worth, and then a night game in Ames, and now another night game in Lubbock.
mhm.
Oh, they might just run out of gas. Hopefully, if that happens, then we go into Saturday with no spots filled in the Big 12 championship games. Texas can still go in there if two of the three teams, including Kansas State, Oklahoma, or Oklahoma State, lose. So if just two of those teams lose, that opens up the door for Texas to get in even with a loss. Now, if Texas loses on Friday and two or three of those teams win, again, that's Kansas State, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, then there will be three or four teams tied for both championship berths. Multiple scenarios exist, and that's where things. I mean, that's where the meat really gets into.
How happy is like each conference? I'm sure has like those schedule the people that put together the schedules, and they have like those number crunchers in the back that are like they're in charge of this. How awful is this for them? Like they're trying to maybe just enjoy like a Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah.
You mentioned like the SEC, ACC, they're just kind of cruising. Those are just like they don't have to worry about tiebreakers. Conference, they can put their feet up over the weekend, say, "Boy, isn't college sports awesome?" And the Big 12 like rule tie committee, they're thinking, "Oh man, this isn't fun." Like they're gonna deal with angry fan bases, especially if this gets really murky. And again, the way this conference season has gone, why wouldn't it? We're in murkiness. We got to embrace it at this point.
Well, and the Big 12 up until this year with the expansion of the new four teams has really been pretty clear cut. You play every team in your conference, so every team has a head-to-head tiebreaker over everybody, one way or the other. And then I guess unless you get to a point where it's like 3 2 loss teams or 3 1 loss teams at the top, and then you kind of go into that. But just the fact that you could have 3 or 4 teams tied for both championship spots. It's 4 teams for 2 spots. I
Mhm.
mean, it doesn't get any better than that. But you're absolutely right. It is as murky as it gets, and that's yeah. You don't prepare for that. Obviously, they didn't prepare for this, and it's incredible that it's come down. And of course, it's so funny that it's the Big 12 that has this debacle, not the Big 10 or the SEC, but the Big 12, which is just so on brand. I feel like I got to hit that point home. It's so on brand for this conference.
Like, I mean, it's eerily similar. I remember a podcast. This was a few months ago, Brandon, where we were talking about just Big 12 history, and it has that similar vibe to that first year when they went with the one true champion model, and they were like, we're not going to have a conference championship game. We're determining everything in the regular season. And then TCU and Baylor were tied at 8-1. Both had great seasons, 11-1 each. And the Big 12, instead of submitting like one conference champion, which in my opinion should have been Baylor, just because they won the head to head over
Mhm.
TCU. But they didn't. They submitted both as co-conference champions, and then they were left out of the college football playoff, the first one, as the 5 and 6 seeds. And it weirdly feel, and it, I mean, the Big 12 looked hyper incompetent during that time. And even though I think they're on much better leadership ground now, this still isn't a great look for the conference that they can't like that there's still like a little bit of unclarity if there is just nothing but unfiltered chaos.
You're absolutely right. So it looks like that we're going to get another slate of scenarios at the conclusions of Friday's games. So we could. So Texas is the only one who can lock up a spot on Friday because also TCU and Oklahoma play on Friday. So Texas could lock up, but yeah, like I said, we're rooting. I mean, one, we're rooting against Texas always, horns down, but also we're rooting just for the chaos because it really gets murky if they lose, and it gets a little bit clearer if Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Kansas State all lose, because then that opens up the back door again for Texas, and they'll slide in, and then whoever wins out of those three teams, if any, get in. But if those teams can just hang on, Texas loses. I mean, that's outstanding for me. And like I said, there's 126 different outcomes possible from this fiasco, which I would love to really exercise how crazy those scenarios can be.
I mean, at this point, I say we just get the dartboard out and just throw like just get a captain from each team. Just go to the dartboard. The two close to the middle target. That's your Big 12 championship. That's if instead of like if it gets to a point where they're not sure or there's like a lot of murkiness involved, I think that's how they should dictate it. Like, why not? You know, state of Texas. I mean, they're famous, Brandon, in their high school football scene. Many years ago, they would determine, you know, that there was some ties at a district level. They'd flip a coin. They'd flip a
Yeah.
coin in on some unnamed gas station in the rural Texas, and they'd say, here's who's going to the playoffs based on this coin flip." So you never know. But 126 is pretty crazy. It shows to how fascinating the league has been this year, and even this last week's slate of games showed the unpredictiveness of this league. Where um, every single one of those four teams mentioned at one point during their games were on thin ice. So it shows how balanced and tough the league has been this year.
And just kind of going through that, just kind of skimming through a couple of these games here. Well, I guess we'll open up the pick 'em here because both had pretty winning weeks. I was able to pick up one game on you. We both had Iowa State, unfortunately, and then our
Gustavo, how could you
Gustavo.
let me down, buddy? Oh, we had it.
Yeah, I mean that was a
Ah, man.
tough one. But just kind of skimming through here. Kansas State, by the way, I didn't think looked very. I'm impressed with Kansas. I should say. I
Yeah.
shouldn't bash on Kansas State, but Kansas with their third string quarterback going toe to toe with Kansas State like that, that's impressive.
Kansas, Brandon, I wrongfully accused Kansas last week of having the worst performance of the week in the Big 12 after their loss to Texas Tech when, Okie State lost by 42 to
Yeah.
UCF. So hand up, I was wrong. Kansas really, I thought, battled extremely well against an excellent Kansas State team. Uh, they outgained Kansas State with a kid who's, at the QB level. Uh, he is a freshman and an inexperienced freshman at that in Ballard. And they were able to get some decent stuff out of him. Like they played well. They were up by 11 in the third quarter. They looked like they were in good shape, but give Kansas State a lot of credit for not folding over, getting everything done, and finding a way to get that victory. I mean, obviously save K-State's chances for a potential opportunity to repeat as Big 12 champs. But Kansas did impress me. Lance Leipold and his staff, we've praised him all season, rightfully so, Brandon. Uh, but boy, they came out with a really good game plan. It took K-State absolutely everything to get out of there with a road victory.
And also this fuzziness with Jalen Daniels kind of came in after we recorded last week, but what a weird murky situation that is, because he goes out very suddenly right before the Texas game, literally minutes before kickoff. He's a scratch in that game. Says it's a back injury, doesn't play the next week. To me, it looked like he was trying to save. It looked very clearly to me like he was trying to save his red shirt, and then potentially hit the transfer portal next year. Because why else? If you're going to stay at Kansas, why would you care if you burn a year of eligibility?
Right.
And then he comes out last
Yeah,
week with
yeah,
like a weird video where he's training, he's back. Also want to point out in that video there's no Kansas gear on him. He doesn't mention the Jayhawks in his video, but does kind of imply with the cadence of the video that he's coming back to Kansas. So I
yeah.
guess he's coming back, but it still just feels very weird.
Yeah, it's a situation where we're not behind closed doors, so not going to make any projections or anything of what's going on behind there. Definitely a unique situation. I think Kansas was definitely thrown off kind of by what transpired mid-season. I think it shows the kind of culture they have that Daniels wants to come back. I still, with every single college athlete out there, not just Jalen Daniels, but everybody, with the NIL chaos and with the transfer chaos, until I literally see a uniform on that person by that next August, there's just stuff behind the scenes that I don't know if I'm not, thankfully I'm not a college coach. And yes, they make more money than I do. They earn that paycheck. There's demand in it. I wouldn't want to be a college coach. I just think it'd be too tough on me to you build to a roster, you do a great job of cultivating it, you find success, and then realize it might get poached a little bit. That there might be schools or back channels happening. That's not easy. I can't imagine how tough it is. And for a fan base, it's not easy either to build. Look, it's natural. You build a love for a player, that player builds a love for the university. Obviously, I'm pro NIL. I want these kids to make as much money as they can. There's demand. Why wouldn't they? But it's still not easy. And so I guess when I hear a player or a coach for that matter, how many coaches say we're staying at a program and then 2 weeks later they go to a different school? That happens all the time too. So for Kansas and Daniels, I think it's a testament to how good their program is. But it's not just him. I think it's like a lot of college football players, Brandon, that I'm pretty skeptical. I'm not going to say, boy, I can't wait to see what they look like for this team next year, because you and I both know how like much there's roster turnover across a healthy amount of college football teams.
Yeah, and I guess the last theory that I have on it is that, of course, Lance Leipold and being at a program as unique as Kansas, where you don't quite get the same kind of buy-in from some of these other big schools, potentially Lance Leipold could be going elsewhere. And if I'm Jalen Daniels and my career is tied to the coach, I'm thinking, A, if he leaves, there's almost no shot that whoever they bring in here at Kansas is going to be able to put me in a successful spot. So I'm gonna just sit out the rest of the year, save my red shirt just in case, and then I don't know. Maybe over the last couple of weeks, they've had some like candid conversations where
Mhm.
Leipold's like, "I'm actually, I'm gonna get reached out for, for the Michigan State job, probably on the list for the Texas A&M job, so on and so forth. Um, but I'm staying, so you can stay too." And maybe at this point, it's just too late in the season for him to come in and burn that year of eligibility. But yeah, definitely a unique situation, probably one that we'll see more
Mhm.
commonly as we get deeper into the NIL era of college football.
Yeah. But that said, give Kansas a lot of credit, going with that third string running back. Turnovers were the difference too, Brand. I mean, the three turnovers hurt. And again, for K-State, they just you're going to get productiveness pretty much every game out of this Kansas State team. They are always consistent for the most part. And they've put together you know, just a very just tidy little 8-3 season. Yeah, Iowa State at home this week could so very well could be a 9-win season. Again, still that outside shot of playing in Dallas in just under a couple weeks.
That's crazy. And crazy season for Kansas State because you come in and you think, oh, it's kind of Big 12 title or bust. And then it's just been such a season of peaks and valleys for them because you lose to Missouri. You didn't know how good Missouri was going to be at the time on a 61-yard field goal. So that kind of puts a damper in things. You go into conference play with a loss, and then picked up a couple of bad losses throughout the season slates. And you're now kind of on the outside looking in the Big 12 race, but you get highlights like Will Howard's been really good down the stretch. You've seen some really great flashes out of Avery
Mhm.
Johnson. And so yeah, it would be an interesting scenario for them because I think if Texas wins, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State would have to lose for Kansas State to get in.
Yeah.
I think that
Mhm.
that's how it would go. So, TCU's been on a downhill. I don't think that you bet on them to beat Oklahoma. So
Yeah.
overall, but you capture momentum. Avery Johnson's going to be a heck of a quarterback next year. I also heard some rumbles that Will Howard may not be ready to leave yet. He's still got some eligibility on him. He could go to the NFL. He could transfer. He could stay. I don't see him staying. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me with Avery Johnson nipping at his heels. But yeah, I mean, I guess he could leave. In fact, I guess, kind of reminds me of a similar situation a couple of years ago where Nebraska had a quarterback that they liked who, built up
Mm.
this great career with the Huskers, then transferred. Maybe Will Howard faces similar fates and, goes somewhere else. And, injuries kind of derailed Adrian Martinez's time in Manhattan. But maybe, he comes up, maybe somewhere up north, maybe play some Big Ten ball. Who knows?
Like I said, we think we're not going to, I'm not even going to remotely project on how rosters will look till next summer or anything like that. But in this era of college football, expect the unexpected. And that's cliche, extremely cliche, but it's true. I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't even think fortune tellers could tell you what's going to happen. Like that's just how unpredictable uh just the state is right now. But that's what makes it kind of interesting too. Like it brings a whole different type of dynamic as well.
Yeah, and then also looking at the slate, two teams that you probably didn't peg to be on upset alerts or to really get pushed around a little bit. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State both had probably tougher matchups than they had anticipated. Now with Oklahoma State, you kind of chalked it up as like, well, that's just what their season's been like. You get blown out by South
Mhm.
Alabama, come back, beat up on Kansas State and Oklahoma, and then lose to get blown out by Arthur Gustavo Malzahn the third.
Mhm.
And same kind of thing with Oklahoma going to Provo. We've talked about that all year. How that's not a gimme place to go into and take a win. But they both survive in advance. So the state of Oklahoma is still alive.
They are, and give Oklahoma loses Dylan Gabriel halfway through the game, which that's a major factor to lose your quarterback. And BYU was hanging with them with Dylan Gabriel. It wasn't a situation where he leaves and the team gave up. Oklahoma defensively, I thought really had a nice second half. They only hold BYU to 7 points. And they were able to find, just enough plays defensively. They get uh, just a major pick six from Billy Bowman Jr. And that kind of turns out to be a difference, Brandon, in terms of that matchup. And give Houston a lot of credit. I feel they have really found some genuine strides during this latter portion of the season where they're more competitive. They played a really good first half on Saturday. Okie State was really on their heels. But give the Cowboys credit, unlike the week before where, they got bullied and decided to cower and take the punches. They took a few punches early, but they swung back and they did not miss, especially in the second half, to keep those hopes alive. So good win for the Pokes, good win for the Sooners. And again, just the madness of this tiebreaker situation. But boy, they both sweated on the road last week. No question about that, Brandon.
No question. And I think that brings us to the big game of conversation and the game that you were honored to
Man.
be at in the Texas Iowa State game. Let me just ask you this, Russell, as somebody who's been around Jack Trice quite a bit in your day, how did that environment pregame compare to some of the other games you've been to?
I felt fans were pretty thirsty. You just felt like they were ready to rock, ready to roll. Historically, Iowa State usually does not draw well in November. at Jack Trice. They do not get great crowds. This November, they're able to pull off a couple sellouts. And the energy before the game, Brandon, I felt it was palpable. I mean, people were in their seats early. That stadium was full by kick. There was nobody, there was no stragglers or not many stragglers, you know, way down the parking lot getting that final beer in them before going in. And it was a crowd that was definitely lubricated. They're ready to go. And the energy was great, Brandon. The fireworks were a risky move, though. Smoke kind of just was a haze above the stadium for a good chunk of that first quarter since there was no wind, which is kind of rare in Iowa. But um, fans were thirsty. Texas got to give them credit. They kept the fan base kind of out of it that first half. It was a pretty uneventful 6-3 game. And, Longhorns kind of took it to them in the second half. Iowa State had a couple plays, but fans are thirsty, Brandon. I'll tell you that. I feel that Texas and OU, they've seen some great crowds this year in terms of anger. And to the credit of both those teams, have been able to navigate those choppy waters relatively well outside of OU's one blemish down in Stillwater. But other than that, both teams in the end able to find a way to, have a great season on the road in the Big 12.
Yeah, unfortunately, you have to give a lot of credit to Texas just with the way that they've navigated because it feels like in years past, I mean, they've had talented teams. Sark's been there 3 years now. He's a good ball coach. I even think Tom Herman was a good ball coach when he was there, and now he's at Florida Atlantic. I think he's a good ball coach. You have talent, this and that, but it just felt like when the spotlight got a little bit bright, that's when they kind of folded in on themselves. And I mean, not to like totally bash on them because that happens to a lot of teams. That's really the difference between being in that like S tier college football, like the Georgias and Alabamas and Ohio States, and then you can still be a really good team and still just not crack that tier, like a Penn State, is one that comes to mind. And this year they've really just taken care of business. And like you said, their last year in
Mhm.
the Big 12, they're gonna get everybody's best shot. And I see Texas fans on Twitter kind of boasting that they're everybody's Super Bowl, and I mean they're kind of right. I hate that sentiment at all,
Yeah.
but you're right. All these teams are getting up for these big games. I'm sure all these schools are lobbying the conference for night games. Are getting their third one in 3 or 4 weeks in Lubbock after going to Ames at night, after going to Fort Worth at night, and just getting everybody's best shot. And they're taking it. And Saturday night I think was a good emphasis on that because it felt like the makeup of what would be a Texas loss. They had two
Yep.
touchdowns called back due to penalties. They weren't creating a whole lot on offense, and Rocco played outstanding, especially
Yeah.
towards the stretch there. So you think if he gets hot, if this Iowa State offense gets hot, they could absolutely pull ahead and just never quite got the horses to do it. Texas stayed in their game plan. It stayed calm, and boy, you can just feel the experience and the
Mhm.
game reps with that team. And it's very unfortunate, but I mean, you got to tip your cap to them.
You do. And, they hold Iowa State to 9 yards team rushing. And
Wow.
that really was, I felt the difference. And I think it was noticeable in the stadium too, where people openly frustrated anytime Iowa State tried to run the ball because there was, you know, no room whatsoever. I mean, a long of a night of 6 yard carry. That's the longest run of the night for Iowa State. That give that Texas front seven a ton of credit. I mean, they made life extremely difficult for the Cyclones on Saturday night, and that turned out to be a major factor. And their special teams makes a play. They score. Texas scores early in the third quarter, but Iowa State comes right on back. Beck throws just a fantastic ball to Eli Sanders for a touchdown. Fans are into it. Everybody's thinking, all right, extra point. We're only down three midway through third. Finally, crowds into it. And then they block the extra point and take it back for 2 points. And you could feel the energy kind of just get taken out of that stadium a little bit. So Texas made plays. Yeah, I don't say it with any pride because I'm ticked about it, but they were the better football team and earned their victory uh, in Ames for sure. But that said, I want to give my Cyclones a lot of credit. The fact that they have built this into it's not a rivalry even remotely, but just a respectable football game that even Texas has to respect Iowa State a little bit the last few years, which I never thought was possible many years ago. Give them credit. You and I, Brandon, we saw 2019 a game-winning field goal for Iowa State against Texas. 2020 they win down in Austin. 2021 obliterated up in Ames. Texas guys the last couple years, but Iowa State's credit, they've competed well. It's a young team. And again, don't know what's going to happen in the offseason, but on paper, a ton of guys coming back on paper for next year. But again, still a lot to happen between now and next August.
And that's exactly what I wanted to roll into, because we were talking about Iowa State coming into this year as the worst, if not the worst team in the conference, at least almost with certainty the worst of the Hateful Eight teams coming into the season. But they have just been really good. We talked about not having Hunter Deckers, their starting quarterback last year from the sports betting scandal, and this team, I think it's like 19 out of 22 spots are freshman and sophomore. Like it's an insanely young roster, and they're finding ways to win. And yeah, you don't want to count your chickens before they hatch, with the transfer portal and everything like that. But when you get guys to come in and buy into a system with a guy like Matt Campbell, then you see the fruits of the labor, and you see wins against teams like Oklahoma State, and potentially a win against Kansas State up here this weekend, and you feel the energy in Jack Trice like they've had the season. I mean, of course, the Kansas and the Texas game didn't go their way by any stretch of the imagination, but that energy is very unique. And Jack Trice, I would absolutely go on and say that's the best, college football environment in the state of Iowa, at least. And so I think that's something that you tip your cap to. But and the youth and the success of this team, and as we've talked about to exhaustion at this point, the power vacuum that's going to be the Big 12 conference coming into next year.
Yeah.
I mean, who says this Iowa State team can't develop? Rocco Beck can't develop into a guy who takes down Brock Purdy's records and develop the talent around him, build momentum like they have, and that they can. And who knows, they might be the next kingpin of the Big 12. They got as good a chance as anybody, I think.
I agree. And, that's, just looking at the teams coming back and then teams next year, it will be a pretty exciting conference for next year. And we'll do plenty of stuff throughout the offseason, kind of deciphering how that plays out. But between kind of this new 12 team group, and then you add the corner four schools and the two Arizona schools in Utah and Colorado, like, Arizona's playing great football right now. They're going to be interesting. Colorado's had a lot of headlines. They've had a disappointing end of their season. Utah has been extremely consistent. And hey, Arizona State, it's warm in January, so you can't complain about that. And they've got potential as well. I think they for sure. But you just look at just this conference as a whole, and you're right, it's going to be wide open for next year. And it's an exciting time for all those teams that maybe are looking to take that next step. I think Iowa State definitely is looking at themselves in that opportunity. But you're dead right, Brandon. For a team that back in August, I said to many people, I did not think this team could be a bull team this year. I had pretty serious doubts. Got the 6 wins. Want to give them a lot of credit. Even when things looked dead after the Ohio loss, they came back swinging and put together some quality football. So kudos to Matt Campbell and his staff. And we'll see if they can find a way to get a win on Saturday night in Farmageddon.
And I feel like Matt Campbell usually gets thrown around in some of these bigger jobs as far as the head coaching candidate. I haven't heard any of that this year. I've heard it's all been Lance Leipold. Heard it's all been Trailer down at UTSA. There's a guy who was a head coach of a national championship team in Central Florida a couple of years ago who's still unemployed. So yeah, surprised to see. Oh, also just a quick little sidebar, maybe not Big 12 related. I've been hearing that Chip Kelly's getting canned. How crazy is that?
Yeah, I heard the same thing on that, which I feel that UCLA administration is going to take a little closer look after they cooked USC this weekend pretty handedly. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this guy, I think I'd give him one more year. I know his win-loss record isn't the same as it was in Oregon, where this guy just wanted a ridiculous rate for the Ducks. but I wouldn't do it. But you're dead right on the coaching carousel. It's been a very interesting one because there's some big jobs open. But I think some schools are kind of being careful, just looking at other teams that are kind of looking. And I'll use a school I know well in the Arkansas Razorbacks that this fan base has been pretty unhappy with their head coach and Sam Pittman, or at least a very vocal portion, whether that's majority or minority, I don't know. And they made a statement last weekend that Sam's coming back for 2024, despite what will be a bowlless season, a year that they felt they could have been a lot better. But I think they kind of viewed that coaching market and thought they didn't think they could be better. They reportedly got a bunch of NIL money all of a sudden freed up, and they feel they can get a better roster, and they're going to ride with Sam. And, you know, I don't know if on the field coaching is perfect at time for Sam, but there's not a better guy, I feel, on earth that's going to lead that program from a character standpoint. So, but that shows where the carousel is, Brandon, that it's so unpredictable and how quickly can coaches adapt to this new era. So it's kind of interesting how, schools conduct their searches if there's an opening.
Yeah, and I'll give some credit where credit's due here. There's a matchup Black Friday this week, 11 a.m. on CBS. I won't tell you who the two teams are. You can do the digging for yourself. And you have two programs. One program who has a career head coach who's won, I don't know, 7 out of every 10 games or
Yeah.
so. And then you have a program who fires coaches for winning 7 out of every 10 games. The standard's difference, and sometimes the downside is sometimes you miss on head coaches. It's real easy to do, a lot harder to find a heavy hitter. The other coach, the other program's been just fine with just being above average for the last 20 years. And that's exactly what they've been. So grass isn't always greener on the other side.
No.
But, some programs, aspire for more than getting shillelagh'd by Stanford in the Rose Bowl. So, yeah, you see the end of both coins there.
Well, I mean, here's honest question. Would you rather coach college or NFL?
I mean, it's tough to say. Okay, so if I'm just talking quality of life,
Yeah.
well, it's so tough because
Yeah, no, I know. That's why I'm asking.
I feel like NFL coaches have the more clock in, clock out kind of role. You get an off season,
Yeah.
um, but
Because
you
both
also,
sides are going to work hard in
yeah,
season no matter what. That's
for sure.
guaranteed, no question.
But especially with the transfer portal, and I think where this question really gets interesting is the fact that I don't think college coaches really get an off season anymore. But on the flippity
Mhm.
flop, you get more control of your team. You get to the NFL,
Yeah.
and if you don't have a franchise quarterback, you're toast in 3 years. And they don't give out the $72 million buyouts like they do
No,
in
they
college
don't.
football either. So it's a tough slate. Um, I mean, I personally I just love college football. I love the fact that you can really build something out of nothing in a way that I just don't think that you can do it in the NFL, and the margins are so thin, and you have to
Yep.
worry about things like salary cap, and you have to worry about things like roster management, and it's just it to me it seems like the higher ceiling can kind of roll in college. But I mean, you can absolutely see how that would wear somebody down and why an NFL job would be attractive.
Yeah, I think both are tough because I think you got to manage egos no matter where you're
Yeah,
at. I'd rather do NFL personally. I just think the recruiting would be exhausting
exhausting. Yeah,
i- in this era for me personally. That'd be the one I think that would, if you told me go down one route or the other, I would do NFL. And money's good both sides. And if you're a head coach at a big school in college, you can make more than most, if not all, NFL coaches. NFL they don't disclose salaries as much as the college level, but um, I don't know. It was just an interesting. It was posed to me a couple days ago, and I would rather do NFL, but that's just the collegiate game. But it is interesting just to go back to the coaching carousel. Like, boy, losing is not tolerated anymore. It never has, but I feel even less so. And
yeah, patience is real thin.
Mississippi State is one I'll call out quick too. They, first year head coach who is coming off. I mean, that program loses Mike Leach unexpectedly last December. Uh, Heartbreaking situation to a guy that really beloved in the collegiate sport in Leach. And, did his best at Bridge, all that. Mississippi State a disappointing year. but this isn't known as a traditional power. It's Mississippi
Yeah.
State. They've had a good amount of losing seasons. And he got fired, 11 months later. They said, we don't like the direction our program is going. Thank you for everything with the bridge. I'm thinking, man, that's tough. Like less than a year coming off of a wild situation. But at the vice versa, Northwestern fires Pat Fitzgerald after all that madness, and people said you can't win at Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald's the only one who's ever won. That's why they tolerate a 2-10 season or 3-9 season, because hey, it happens. We're Northwestern. Their first year guys going to a bowl game in what looked like the most chaos you'll find in a college program. So
Yeah.
it's tough. I mean, I don't envy athletic directors outside of those buyouts. Then I envy them.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think that the real dream is to be a fired college football coach,
Right.
and
I
just
mean,
like you
just
obviously got to be good
man.
enough to get like the $100 million deal,
Right.
but then after that, it's we're just playing with house money at this point.
It is the dream. I mean, just just have me being a fired assistant. Yeah, if you told me I'm fired, like a fired wide receivers coach, and hey, here's a I don't know $100,000 check, I'd be ecstatic. Holy
Yeah.
cow, that's a year I can just cruise. Nothing would get done. I would just cruise for a year with that. You can count on that for
Count on
sure.
it.
Mm.
But we got the final real regular season pick 'em here is kind of emotional here, but we got a good slate.
Man.
Friday we're getting started with TCU, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, and Texas. Like I said, those two games are going to be really drastic, and that's I think another little layer to this. I don't know how intentional it was, but you get 2 days of mayhem where you get Texas, all
Mhm.
eyes on Texas. Are they going to blow it and really open the floodgates, or are they going to lock up their spot? And then Oklahoma, checks their box, waiting on Oklahoma State.
Mhm.
So we'll just kind of go through here. I'll tell you what, you're up 6 games in the season long pick 'em. So I'm gonna be real honest, Drew. I'm gonna let you go first here on these 7 games, and I get one game where I get to pick the same team as you, and then otherwise I'm going straight
So
straight
pretty much
fade.
you go in. I respect
Yeah.
that, and I'll. You know what? I can probably throw a couple nuggets your way as well, just to make it interesting. Um, Oklahoma TCU. I mean, again, on paper, Oklahoma should be fine. And I'm going, but the question is the Dylan Gabriel situation. How is that injury going to play enough of an impact? I still say OU has more talent than TCU, so I'm going to go safe. I've got the Sooners at home in Norman, but again, this isn't an impossible game for TCU. This is an opportunity to pull an upset for sure.
And I think this, oh boy, this kind of picked my spot here. I think I'm just gonna roll with TCU here. I don't feel good about TCU, but like I said, I need some chaos to happen if I'm gonna creep back into here. And I'm definitely rooting for TCU because without Texas or Oklahoma, that opens up the spot I think for a non-SEC Big 12 championship game, if I'm not mistaken. Because I
That would be it.
think
Would you're right? Yep.
because then if Kansas State and Oklahoma State both win, I think they then advance if those two teams lose.
Yep.
I think that's right.
That sounds
But
right.
so that to me is probably the dream scenario is Kansas State and Oklahoma State getting in there. And yeah, I'm still trying to figure out which one I'm going to side with you here on. But yeah, I got to keep it rolling.
Okay, that's respectable. That's respectable. So you got Texas TCU. I mean, Texas unsurprisingly a favorite. Um, really was able to use the pass game and run game really well last week, and we didn't talk about Texas Tech's game against Baylor. Give the Red Raiders some credit, Brandon. Winners of 3 straight. Or they beat Central Florida last week. But they beat TCU, Kansas, Central Florida. They're playing a lot better football. At least they're bowl eligible. Give them a lot of credit there for turning around their season doing that. But I'll believe it if I see it. But I got to go to Texas. I got to hook them.
That feels like the safe bet, and to me, it does kind of feel like if Texas was going to stumble, it would have been these last couple of weeks. I have to go Texas Tech here. I feel like there's enough of a margin to where Texas Tech could pull it out. They have been playing well as of late, and you look for that Week 13 rally out of your guys. So I'm going Red Raiders. If I wasn't in such a predicament in the standings, I would feel very confident about picking Texas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, but that's the thing, picking conservatively doesn't necessarily mean doesn't mean success. That's how I built my lead this year, Brandon, by taking risky shots, like always taking Gustavo. So that's how it is. But going to Iowa State, Kansas State. Again, K State has that outside shot. Um, they're playing respectable football, but it's Farmageddon, Brandon. And this series is a wild one. We went on a long rant a couple podcasts ago about how for right now, this is a series that's going to stop for a year in 2027, which is still a travesty. And I have all off season to complain about it. And I'll tell you what, Brandon, this one makes no sense because our run game is not great. But you know what? Iowa State, I'm going to say cooks with some fish grease. I got an upset in Manhattan.
So also, side note, on the broadcast, they panned over to a fan, and he showed showed his phone to the camera, just like a little flash by. Very dangerous spot if you're a network producer and somebody's flashing something on your phone. But he had some text just said "Save Farmageddon." So we're lobbying for it pretty hard here, and we got to enjoy it while it's here.
Mm-hmm.
I was very excited to take Iowa State here because I think they're going to be dialed in off of a brutal loss.
Mm-hmm.
A great opportunity to refocus, re-energize the troops. And Kansas State coming off of a tight win against their in-state rival. Maybe they come down off of the mountain a little bit. Again, I don't feel that great about it to where I can go with you here. Give me the Wildcats, which I don't feel too bad about.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I mean, they're the favorites. Senior night, they'll have Manhattan's a great crowd, great environment. Another night game as well. Love that's getting a nighttime, prime time spot, the Farmageddon, and hopefully a game that product that delivers for the fans. And by then, Brandon, we'll have a very clear picture of kind of how the Big 12 race is going to pan out. As you mentioned, that OU, kind of what happens Friday will clearly dictate how we view Saturday. But it's a winnable game for Iowa State, but K-State, they are rocking and rolling. They've got to feel good about getting another potential 9-win year.
Does Oklahoma State keep it rolling, or are they in trouble against the Cougars?
Well, this is a fascinating game because a couple weeks ago, I would have said Oklahoma State, no problem. And that's what I'm still going to say is Oklahoma State, no problem. Boy, BYU, I thought, competed really well on Saturday. They looked much better against OU than they did against Iowa State the week before. But for Oklahoma State, after two kind of, they get the loss in one game against Central Florida, but they find a way against Houston on Saturday. I think they're going to be very happy to be back in old Boone T. Pickens Stadium. So I've got the Cowboys over BYU.
Yeah, this one I got to go opposite as well. And this one I don't feel too bad about just because, and there's no like objective, analysis for picking against Oklahoma State here, but it just feels like a spot where they would come up short. On if I was going to go objective, I'd probably tell you that they're probably going to be dialed in. Like, you got inside track to a Big 12 championship game appearance, despite having two of the worst losses in the conference to South Alabama and UCF. But it does kind of feel like it can't be that easy for the Cowboys. They're not going to make it that easy, and maybe BYU pulls it out close. It feels like they're kind of playing with house money at this point. Gave Oklahoma a run for their money last week. Maybe try to get the other team in the. Oh boy, I don't even know.
And not to mention, I mean, hey, you got to try to defend the pick, but they are battling for bowl eligibility, Brandon, and that does mean something. So. That's something to keep an eye on too. So Houston, Central Florida, man, a classic AAC matchup between these two schools. You've got two of my favorite hairdos in the Big 12 and Dana Holgerson versus Gus Malzahn. If Central Florida finds a win, the Knights are going bowling, baby. And that is something I can't get enough of. Give me Central Florida at home in nice sunny Orlando. Or yeah, it'll be sunny. I bet it's sunny and warm if I had to guess.
It feels like a safe bet here.
Yeah.
Oh boy, now this is where I want to start like really diving into to which one I can go with you on because I'm looking ahead at the sheets. Don't like Cincinnati. Kansas, however, does have a third string quarterback, so I don't know if I feel too good about so good about Kansas to where I put that in as my lock for the week. And then Baylor's been atrocious this year. Got blown out by TCU last year, and the poorly named Blue Bonnet Bowl. Um, I've never seen two rival fan bases come together in such a beautiful and harmonious way. Than just to shit on the idea of calling it the Blue Bonnet Battle or whatever they
Yeah.
end up calling it. Um, West Virginia's not a bad team. I think, yeah, I think I still got to go with Houston here. Don't have much analysis here. Just gotta hope for a
Got
prayer here.
hope. Hey, they have shown life the last month. I will say that. So it'll be interesting. Kansas, Cincinnati. Oh man, this is a fascinating game to me because Kansas, I think, has played really nice at home this year. On the road, haven't been as perfect. They do have a nice win up in Ames for the Jayhawks. I don't know, Brandon. I don't know why. But you know what? I'm going to make your decision easy. I'm going to go Cincinnati. I'm going to say on senior day, they are going to play well. Emory Jones is going to put together a big game. And I'll say that for a young or a Kansas team that does have some experience in certain spots, maybe just not prepared. Maybe they're living off of, hey, we played well last week in our. Granted, no one wants to lose, and I'm guessing the coaching staff will make their life not fun. But maybe they're playing that card of, hey, you know what? We feel good. We were competitive. We should have won, but we didn't. And maybe the vibes are high. And then Cincinnati's kind of plays ticked, knows it's their last game of the season. So give me the Bearcats. Let's go. Let's see some new blood find a way.
Yeah, that's not a bad take. If I was gonna sell you on Cincinnati, like I thought I might have to, it'd be you come in with the coach like Satterfield, and those guys in the locker room want him to do well, and they want
Right.
him to find success, even if maybe they weren't even the players recruited by him. Um, you still look at him and be like, hey, this guy deserves this. We got to go out. We're not going to a bowl game. We're not playing for a conference championship game. But by golly, if we could get a win here against Kansas at home in front of our fans on senior day, boy, that would just mean the world. But you're right. And going against a third string quarterback also probably feels like a good favorable matchup, but still got to go with the Jayhawks. I think the talent gap is still there,
Yeah.
coaching advantage quite a bit. Maybe we'll get to see what some of that Cincinnati home field magic looks like that I was sold on as they were coming into the conference.
Yeah. No, I mean, not impossible at all. I do want to say for our final game, you can make a trip, Brandon, down to Waco, and you can get in for $3 if you buy right now.
Wow,
I'll tell
$3.
you that. $3 to watch West Virginia take on the Baylor Bears. And yeah, this is kind of a game for Baylor of what goes on with the head coach situation following the game. That'll be, I think, a topic of discussion. So I've got the Mountaineers just purely because it's almost heaven, West Virginia. So give me the Mountaineers. No analysis on this one. Baylor just has shown a few lifeless performances, a few too many this season, especially at home. They've had some struggles there.
Yeah, and this is the one that I do feel good about just sticking with you. And boy, it sure it would kind of stink if we both came up on the wrong side of this. If I was going to sell you on it, Dave Aranda might be coaching for his job, so he might pull out, all the stops last game of the season, senior day, maybe. But yeah, I've given Baylor so much benefit of the doubt this year. I don't got it in me this year or this week.
I can't blame you even remotely, but just before you take us out of the spreadsheet, if that is how on your side that actually plays out, holy cow. If we get an Oklahoma, Texas, and Oklahoma State loss,
Boy,
that
so
would be
that would
simple. Then it would be Texas, Kansas State. We
yep.
wouldn't even have to worry. if that's
That's
how it
right.
played out.
But
Um,
boy, I mean, just imagine going to sleep that Friday night after witnessing that chaos of Texas
man,
Tech beating Texas and TCU beating Oklahoma.
man, you just know that Oklahoma State and K State, they'd be like me looking at the dollar menu at McDonald's back in the day. You get those hands put together and you just licking those chops of man, give me that McDouble and fry for $2. Man, feed me now. I mean, I'm
Now,
saying, Brandon, if that's how it plays out on your end, if that legit happened, holy cow. That would
well,
be
I
incredible, incredible content.
I wonder what that parlay would pay out as. It's got to be like plus 50,000.
You gotta talk to your boys on the other podcast. I think that sounds like an easy one right there. I mean, if you're heading, you know, you might have to call in some favors to find a way to get that done because that would be. I know that's a parlay that pays.
Well, I'll give you a
Or if you
sneak
re-
peek here, Drew
okay,
Russell, because I do have. I am coming up to Iowa for Thanksgiving. Um, so I do have one bet that I'm putting down. And can you do you have any idea of what it could be?
well, I'll tell you what. There's a game in a different conference happening at 11 a.m. on CBS this upcoming Friday morning, which is hilarious. It's on CBS. Uh, And I feel it's going to involve a red team beating a black and yellow team, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Almost. It's the classic emotional hedge going Iowa money line because I was actually a 1.5 point dog. Can you believe it? A
Really?
5-win Nebraska team favorite over the Big Ten West champs. So Iowa money line
Isn't Big
is,
Ten
is an
football
easy.
just absolutely beautiful?
I
I
mean,
mean, I
it's such a
really am going to
pure.
miss, like, that Vince McMahon clip that's been making the rounds the last couple months of him just shaking his head and waving off the camera. That's how you
Yeah.
explain Big Ten West football in about 10 to 20 years. It
Um,
really is that it's poetic. I personally am going to miss it. That's incredible. And again, a big game for Big Red as they take on the team out east. Uh, Potential bowl eligibility. Got to find it, Brandon. Got to find it.
no kidding. I mean, it's a big one here. Actually, while we have you on, let me cook this up here real quick. So we got Oklahoma, we
Okay.
got TCU, we got who do we got? We got Kansas State.
And the scenarios really are again when you have 126 of these bad boys. I mean, it really is incredible the amount of stupidity they could be come up with. And I do want to have as a final point, Brandon, as you mash that up, really no upsets in college football last week. Um, which I was a little surprised about that we didn't have really any major upsets. I think North Carolina was the highest seeded team to go down last week, and they're in the 20s. And I gotta say, it's setting up to be a very interesting final week in the conference championship season. Also, Jordan Travis getting hurt for Florida
Oh
State, their
my gosh,
big
how
quarterback.
heartbreaking is that?
That's I'm just curious how the committee views that stuff, whether it's fair or not. I don't know. I feel horrible for that team. That's their leader. He's had a great year. It's brutal. So I'm just curious how things play out because when you have the big game going on, and boy, oh boy, is Gus Johnson going to be on another level on Saturday morning for that. And you have just all these potential scenarios. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. There are so many. All right, feed me. What do we got?
So yeah, it's a 6 leg parlay. I couldn't find the West Virginia spread on here, but it's plus 127 340. So $100 wager on my parlay would win me $127,340.65. What I
Look,
mean, that's just a donation to the sports books here.
that's how they're treating it. Or, I mean, you'll have two great stories. You'll talk about how you won that and how, more importantly, you won your pick'em in Go Big 12 or Go Home.
That's
And
right.
made that's the comeback you talk about. Forget the 127,000. Hey, you know what? Whatever. But coming back in the Big 12 pick'em, that'd be
That's
something special.
the real hero ball there.
That's
Well, boy, I mean, we got a great week of
127.
college football coming up. I mean, it's an insane parlay, but yeah, it is a machine for chaos of Big 12 scenarios. especially because that Kansas State game's not
I feel
until
just
till
to
the
for a
night.
talking right for talking point, Brandon. I would be willing to chip in $5, and you can put in 5 just to have a Thanksgiving conversation with various family or friends or however you're spending it.
You know,
And just to talk about that, yeah, I put down $10 on this parlay. Do you think you'll hit? And everybody just screams at you that you lost $10.
yeah, what a donation to the sports book. That still pays out almost 13 grand.
That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
mean, if it hits, I mean, I'm feeling pretty good walking out of there with 6,500.
Yeah, no kidding. That's
mean-
might have to set something like that up.
That used to be a yearly check for me at one point. So I mean
Yeah,
that
no
could be
kidding.
special.
No
That
kidding.
could be. Welcome to radio. So
Yeah.
man. So but it's gonna be interesting, I think, going forward, Brandon, just how everything plays out. Again, I like with the no upsets last week, we got some potential de
We do.
facto,
Yeah.
quarterfinals. It'll have a playoff field this week. It's a lot of fun. I'm curious how the committee views certain one-loss teams, Texas clearly being one of them, but how they'll view a one-loss Ohio State or Michigan team, how they would view, say, Georgia loses to Alabama in the SEC championship. How do they view those two one-loss teams? There's a lot of possibilities. And for a final year in the 14 playoff, I'm not saying we're going to get a fair result in the end, but can't deny it. The entertainment's there.
It should be a great week here, Drew Russell. Any final thoughts before we head into it?
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that parlay to hit for you, Brandon.
It's
I'm
gonna
genuinely
be
pulling
beautiful.
for you.
I can't wait. That's all I had. Great week of college football. We'll be back. We're going to do a basketball preview eventually.
We promise, folks.
But I mean, 126 outcomes. I mean, come on.
We got it. We had to discuss, 10 of them, and there's still much more. So we'll get there eventually, folks. A lot of holiday tournaments as well for basketball this upcoming week. Great Thanksgiving slate. So we'll dial in eventually. Great groups across the board. Great football as well.
Great football. Go Birds.